Hey everybody, welcome to my suburban oasis. My name is Soleil and I garden in Zone 6A in mid-Michigan, and I'm really grateful to all of you for subscribing and for watching the videos, and you all have some really great questions. So I thought we would put together a question and answer video just to go through some of the most commonly asked questions that I get, talk a little bit about them, and then we're going to do a demonstration as part of one of them, because the most commonly asked question that I get, it's probably going to be helpful to have a visual cue as well. So let's get started. Okay, so the first question is, how did I become a gardener? Who inspired me? And how long have I been gardening? So I have been gardening probably since I was about 10. I believe my grandma was probably my biggest inspiration, but my mom also did a lot of gardening around the yard as well. My grandma was certainly really gung-ho about it though, and was in lots of garden clubs, and she had flowers everywhere all of the time, and was always interested in creating beautiful scenes throughout her garden, in her own home, as well as up north at some of the properties that she owned. And that included like an old farmstead where they created a pond area that was beautiful, and they planted it with natural plants like huge drifts of monarda, as well as having herb gardens and just all sorts of different varieties of things. So that's how I learned a lot about plants. And I think when I was 10 years old, we had this apple tree cut down in our side yard, and when we did that, there was an area around the stump that opened up to sunlight instead of shade, and I asked my mom if I could plant something there, and she probably doesn't even remember this, but she said yes. And so I went to the store and I got some bulbs, and they were red gladiolus bulbs, and at the time I also had gotten my first camera. And I feel like taking photos as well as gardening go hand in hand together. And so I planted these gladiolus bulbs, and as they grew and began to flower, I took pictures of them with an old 35mm camera just to document the growing process. And as I did, you know, you had to wait for that film to be developed and all of that. So I had to take pictures over a long period of time. And I, just finally filled up that film roll, and I was able to get it developed, and I had that whole growth pattern of that gladiolus bulb, and it was super fun to do. And that kind of got me hooked onto it. And over time, as I had different houses, whether I lived in a rental house or I lived in a house that I owned, I always had gardens after that. And I used to ask people to buy me things like wheelbarrows for gifts or things like that that were utilitarian, and people always thought it was funny because usually people want gifts that are something beautiful or something luxurious, and I just wanted things that were utilitarian and would help me in the garden. Anyways, I have been gardening that long, and I will put up a picture as well, because a lot of people ask me what my property looked like when I first moved in, and I don't actually have a photo of it originally, but I do have a picture of the front garden that was put up on like a real estate website, so I can show you that picture, which is probably from at least 15 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer. So here's a picture of what it looked like before, and you can see that in this picture I really didn't have a whole lot going on in this garden and had to build from scratch. All right, so question number 2 here is, don't you have slugs and snails? My hostas get eaten by them, and yours looks so great. So this year has probably been the worst year for slugs and snails in my garden that I've ever had. I have never really had a problem with them at all, and I attribute that to the fact that I like to bring wildlife into the garden, even though I do complain a bit about the deer and rabbits eating my flower heads or my buds off of my plants. I do really like having wildlife, and it's an important part of my garden to me. I like to watch it and see it, and it makes me feel like I'm part of the ecosystem around me. So I think that the fact that I have lots and lots of birds in my garden, eating them, I have, people probably don't want to hear this, but I see snakes. We have dragonflies, we have all sorts of different things that are really a broad spectrum of animals. So I think that helps a lot to be able to have those devoured and not have them devour my plants. So if you have any way to do that, integrating birds into your pest management scheme within your garden, I recommend that you do that, whether it's through a bird feeder or even just planting different varieties of plants that have seed heads that the birds like. So things like coneflowers and liatris and anything that produces a nice seed head for them, they really enjoy. Okay, how do I protect from deer, because they're always eating your hostas? So I get a lot of questions about hostas and about animal pressure. And I use liquid fence. So you'll see in the description, I actually have posted a link to liquid fence because that is my go-to for protecting from deer and rabbits. And I use a backpack sprayer that I go around and I spray the garden. And usually I do it more frequently in the springtime, especially because it's raining. And then I can back off a little bit during the summertime because there's lots of things for the deers to eat, as well as the fact that they've been kind of trained that my flowers and my garden does not taste good or smell good to them. All right, question number 4. What kind of mulch do you use and where do you get it? So I get this question a lot. The mulch that I use is usually like a double shredded hardwood or triple shredded hardwood mulch, and we get it in bulk. We actually order it from a landscape supply company that's local to us, and we have it delivered and dumped in our driveway, and then we spend quite a bit of time getting that all around the property. Our property is about half an acre, and because of the number of garden beds and paths that we use the mulch on, we usually order anywhere between 7 to 10 yards of mulch at a time. And sometimes I still need more as the season progresses, after I've done some planting or dividing or just transplanting. And so we tend to try to go back there to get it if we can. Otherwise, as the season progresses, sometimes I do just pick up bags of mulch that are on sale because it's such a small area that I want to cover. So that's how I do that. Okay, question number 5. I have shrubs in a pot. Will they survive over the winter, and do you leave your pots out all winter? So the first question I'm going to answer as part of that is yes, I do leave most of my pots out all winter, but the ones that are not rated for outdoors or frost resistant, I take those into my shed or my garage or someplace that I can store them so they don't crack, because I do have a few of those. I try not to get any of them myself, but sometimes I inherit them. Like I have some from my mother-in-law that I really like, and so I bring those out every year. And my husband also helps me store them in the shed every fall, and that way I can ensure that they don't get broken by the freeze and thaw cycle. However, I have lots of pots that I've gotten off Facebook Marketplace or that I've bought on discount at the end of the season that are frost resistant or are made out of a material that is more impervious to the frost and freeze cycle. And so that means that I can keep them outdoors all winter. And I really prefer that because it's much more low maintenance for me and for the husband. So that's what we try to do. I get a lot of them also off Facebook Marketplace. So that way I get such a deep discount on them that I don't worry about whether or not they do end up, cracking or breaking on me, because then I can just get another type of pot off of Facebook Marketplace at such a good price. Okay, so I actually just answered the next question, which was where do I get my pots? I've definitely gotten a lot of them off Facebook Marketplace. Number 7, where do you get your rocks for the borders? So I have gotten those rocks over time from a variety of different places, including Facebook Marketplace. It's really a great resource for your local area. People may be giving them away. Some people are selling them for a really discounted price. But you do have to be prepared, like if you're getting larger rocks, to have something to transport them in, and somebody who can actually lift them and figure out ways to get them into a vehicle. And you want a vehicle where you're not going to ruin the suspension on it. So sometimes that might even mean that you end up having to rent a vehicle. But we usually borrow my brother-in-law's truck. So he's pretty awesome about letting us do that because it's a work truck, an old work truck, and we can throw them up into the truck bed, and then we can throw them into the yard when we get home and just move them around. And we have a dolly that we bought that also helps us move them around the garden easily so that we don't have to, you know, worry about our backs or that kind of thing. Another place that we get the rocks is also from farmers. They often have them set out by the road. Maybe you're on a road trip or you're driving someplace around and you see them, and then you can go back there at a later date just to go find out how much they might want for them, or if they're giving them away, whatever it is. Sometimes I see them with a big trailer full of rocks that say like 50 cents a piece or $1 a rock. So that can be a really good deal, especially if you're only looking for about 5 rocks to kind of expand a border or something like that. All right, the next question. I have heavy clay soil. How do I make it better? So a lot of people complain about their clay soil. I thought when I first started gardening that clay soil was really kind of a bummer and hard to work with, and it's not that bad. As I've learned over time to work with it and learned what clay soil is and how good it is, I really appreciate the fact that I have clay soil. So I just use a lot of the wood chips like I talked about earlier around the garden, and as they break down, the worms and the small microscopic organisms that are in the soil come up and they break those down and they carry it back down into the soil, and they use whatever it is to have a symbiotic relationship with those plants, and the plants' roots are happy, and it's just amazing. The clay soil has really small particles, but that organic matter helps to add some air into the soil, and it also makes it so that it's much easier to dig in, and roots are much easier to adapt to the soil. And so over time, I've noticed significant improvement in my soil, and sometimes it just takes a couple of years just mulching over your current soil to be able to have such a good improvement, and you'll notice it rather quickly. So yeah, organic matter, compost, manure, anything that can break down. You can use the chop and drop method also. I do that every once in a while, which is just leaving some of the clippings where they lay. So if they're not going to be obvious to somebody walking through the garden, I might just put some leaves behind a shrub or something like that. And that way they just break down right in place, and I don't have to haul them off into my compost pile, which is rather large. I definitely go through a lot of plant material on my property, and I highly recommend having compost bins because then you can reuse, you know, what you would otherwise be getting rid of. Some people don't have the space for that, and I totally get it. But if you do, it's well worthwhile. Okay, next question. How do I know when to water, and what kind of fertilizer do you use? So listening to your garden or watching your garden and observing it is probably the easiest way to tell when to water. When you have a newly planted plant, you're going to need to water more frequently, but you also want to water very thoroughly and not just lightly. And then you want to wait and make sure that you, if you don't know whether to water or not, make sure that you're sticking your finger down in the soil and feeling to see if you know that top inch or two of soil is moist. Because if it is, you don't want to continually water that plant because more plants probably die from being overwatered than underwatered unless they're in, you know, full baking sun. Also, I think you need to be careful when it's hot out of overwatering. A lot of people get afraid because they see their plants wilting, and that can be a sign that your plant does need more water. But when it's really hot out, plants have difficulty staying hydrated during that period of time, and so that means that they kind of naturally wilt as a protection from that heat, and So basically, you need to wait until the day cools down a little bit later and just take a look at your plants and see if they straighten back up and they lift back up and look good. Then that probably means they were just wilting because of the heat of the day and not because they need water. And you'll see that regularly on certain plants. Hydrangea macrophyllus or large leaf hydrangeas are very commonly wilting in the middle of the day. You also might see that with smooth hydrangeas. I'm trying to think about any other plants that do that, but anything that has really big leaves and not any woody stems, real woody stems, can tend to have that wilt happen. Okay, what kind of fertilizer do I use? I generally use mulch as my fertilizer, but I do also buy espoma, and I use whatever kind that I can get my hands on. Generally, my Costco every year has like holly tone in a giant, I don't know if it's a 30-pound bag or 40-pound bag. It's a really big bag at a steep discount, so I'll grab that. Because I do have a lot of plants that can benefit from that, whether it's hydrangeas and azaleas and rhododendrons. All of those are just fine using the holly tone. And I don't know specifically what the pH of my soil is. It is good to do that. You can do soil tests for that. But I find that if I'm using the holly tone just once a year, it really doesn't make that big of an impact on anything. It does really help the azaleas and the rhododendrons with ensuring that they have the ability to take up iron from the soil and be able to stay nice and green. So sometimes I will also, if we have lots of rain, add some of that holly tone to them as well. So all right, those are the main questions, but the most commonly asked question that I get, because people say that they either already have a rock border or they want to create a rock border, but they're really concerned about the fact that they have grass and weeds that creep between their rocks, or they're worried that if they put a rock border in, how in the world will they keep the grass out from their rocks? So this is where I was talking about we're going to do a demonstration, and I'm going to get my hubby and we will show you exactly how we do that. All right, so this is the rock border where we're going to demonstrate exactly how my husband comes through and maintains the border. So this is a newer border that we have, and you can see right now we do actually have some grass that is coming up in between there, and that's the way that it starts. So let us show you how he uses the string trimmer to make the line, and then what we do about those that are between the rocks. And once this is done, the whole process gets more and more simple over time. Usually after the first year, things are nice and clean, and he's able to just use the string trimmer. So here you go. You can see the angle that he uses up against the rocks there. So he just puts the string trimmer right up against them, and it gets the grass real good, and he keeps it about bare a few inches away from all of the stones, so that way the grass can't continue to creep in. And it takes a bit of time to establish this edge, but again, once it's established, it's much easier to maintain over time. So you can see that this garden bed over here has been established for a very long time and has no grass growing in between it anywhere. So now we're going to demonstrate for you exactly what we do about those grasses that are growing in between after you establish a garden bed, or in a current bed that you are trying to you know, keep the weeds out of for the first time if you're trying this method. So this tool is a blowtorch tool, and it's just a weeding tool, and the goal of it is not to actually like burn the plants away, but just to have them wilt and fade. So he can actually burn along the edges there. You just want to see them kind of burnt back, and eventually that just weakens the plants so that they don't keep coming back. I got this for him for, I think, Father's Day one year or something like that. He loves using it. I think everybody loves using a tool like this just because it's kind of fun. Of course, you got to make sure that you do it when there's no risk of fire or anything like that. But as you can tell, that really cleans up the edge even further. And it even does such a good job that, like I said, once it gets established, once you've done this for a while, you don't really have to worry about those weeds, and the blowtorch is no longer necessary. And it's also good for areas in which you can't really get at as well with maybe the string trimmer. So that's the whole process. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this question and answer. I don't know if I will do more of these. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. If you think it's helpful, if you would like to see more of them in the future, just let me know. All right, thanks so much for joining me again today. I really appreciate it, and I hope it was helpful. We'll see you next time.